And a very to all present. We welcome you all today to a webinar on the art of setting flexible indicators in flexible environments for effective monitoring and evaluation. We are proud to announce that this is the first webinar in a series of webinars planned in collaboration of ECOI, which is the Evaluation Community of India, and EvaLuth India. We have co-leaders and representatives of both ECOI and EY India present today to discuss more on the collaboration and the work that is being done. Also today is another very special occasion that we are celebrating. The month of November marks the 1-year anniversary of the formation of EvaLuth India. 1 year ago, a group of young evaluation professionals and aspiring M&E specialists and have been showered by support from ECOI and other senior evaluators. I will take everybody through the very brief rules that we have, and we request you to kindly follow them. Please keep your microphones and videos off at all times, and this will also lessen the load on the internet bandwidth and to preserve the event quality, and will allow you to enjoy the event at in a very good manner. Please switch on your audio and video when you're speaking, and only when you're speaking. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments box. We do have a Q&A at the end of the session, which we will take when we will take up all of your questions. So today's program agenda is as presented on the screen. The welcome address and moderation is being done by myself, Surbhi Seth. I am a young evaluator with the Government of India and a co-leader of EvaLuth India. We welcome Dr. Rashmi Agarwal for the opening remarks today. Rashmi ma'am is a core member of ECOI. She is a member of the management group of Eval Gender and a retired director from the Government of India and a very senior monitoring and evaluation specialist. Welcome, ma'am. The floor is yours. Rashmi ma'am.
Rashmi ji, please unmute. You are on mute.
Good evening, good morning, as per the place you are joining from. It is my great pleasure to announce the webinar series, as already Surbhi has said, from ECOI and EvaLuth India, and this first being on the occasion of the first anniversary of EvaLuth India. The topic for the webinar is already told, that is the art of setting flexible indicators in flexible environment. And we have two excellent speakers today, Jaya Darshini and Ziad Mousa, and it is always so exciting to listen to them. The indicators are a crucial part of monitoring as well as any evaluation, and it is important to have right indicators for the project at a right time. The topic for today highlights the words flexible as an indicator frame for a specific at a good for another similar project at different time or in different regions or for a different target group. Moreover, with a certain environment these days due to pandemic and other socio-economic political situations, the need is to have flexible indicators to adapt to flexible environment. Situations can change dramatically and unexpectedly, as we have seen in recent times with the onset of COVID. The circumstances in which the program was conceived and indicators developed could undergo drastic changes, making it difficult or even impossible to get it at the indicators. Social distancing or communication problems could make it difficult to gather certain types of information in certain accepted manner to meet the needs of certain indicators. An element of flexibility, therefore, needs to be built into the indicator framework. Flexibility in terms of nature of indicators, means of measurement, and also interpretation. This is perhaps more relevant at the evaluation stage, where an evaluator has a greater degree of flexibility in developing the indicators in their scope, range, and means of collecting. But it could equally happen to monitoring framework. For example, If we refer to logical framework, we need to reflect if we need to capture long-term indicators in times of uncertainty to assess the outcome or impacts, or we can have some indicators look at the changes occurring from the very start of the project or a program. I am sure some deliberations will be there on these issues today during the expert talks and the discussions that follow. While criteria and checklists could make it sound more like a science, it perhaps needs a bit of artistry to develop flexible indicators, hence the title of the today's webinar. So we are going to hear today from two experts how this need for flexibility arises in unexpected circumstances and how that flexibility can be built in while identifying indicators. Thank you very much for joining, and over to you, Surabhi.
Thank you, Rashmi ma'am, for starting our webinar on the right note and also very rightly explaining why setting of the correct indicators is an art as much as it is a science. I also welcome my fellow co-leader of Evaluate Asia, Yatin Divakar. He is also the co-leader of Evaluate Asia and Evaluate India both, and he's the monitoring and evaluation researcher at IIT Bombay. Yatin will take us through the wonderful and exciting first-year journey that we have undertaken as part of Evaluate India, and with the hopes of much more success in the years and days to come. Over to you, Yatin.
Thank you, Surabhi. Can you go to the first slide? And yeah, thank you. So I guess everyone in the meeting today is aware of the Evaluate movement, which was started in November 2015 at the second Global Evaluation Forum in Nepal. Evaluate is a global network of YEs. YEs are defined as anyone under the age of 35 or anyone with up to 5 years of experience in evaluation or anyone interested in evaluation but lacking the necessary knowledge. So when Evaluate was started, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so we started Evaluate Asia in December 2019, and under that we also started the activity to start country chapters to promote YE involvement in evaluation. The theory of change that you can see is the broad framework that Asia Pacific regional strategy for evaluation has adopted for involving YEs and promoting YEs and their role in the entire ecosystem. So we see that we promote engagement of YEs by creating new networks and building their capacities, involve them in WOPEs, etc. So that their awareness increases, their engagement increases, they get involved in actual evaluation studies, their voice is heard. All of these increases their skills, knowledge, attitude, etc. And so the overall supply of quality evaluation by experienced evaluators in the region can also increase. So under this project, can you go to the next slide? We realized last year that we also need an Evaluate India chapter, and the diagram on the left shows you the challenges faced by YEs in India, which are related to capacity development, formalization and opportunities, access to resources and funding, and networking and support. To solve these problems, these multiple challenges, we can start by building a community of YEs, train them, and promote their views on different forums. With this idea, we decided to set up Evaluate India last year. Next slide. So it was formed under the country chapters project of Evaluate Asia as a youth body of evaluation community of India, and we prepared a strategy and action plan with inputs from Evaluate Asia, ECOI, and other stakeholders. The launch event was held on 11th of November 2020. We have a broad mission of providing opportunities and connections for YEs to grow together as evaluation professionals and to collaborate with senior evaluators. Towards this mission, we have a vision of over the next 5 years, Evaluate India should become a self-governing autonomous body representing YEs in ECOI, which will be youth accessible, fast-paced network of evaluators who are trusted co-leaders in evaluation practice and capacity development in the country. Next slide. So we developed an overall theory of change for this Evaluate India itself with a broad goal of promoting YE involvement, including women, and making them competent, experienced, well-networked professionals who contribute to evaluation capacity at national, regional, and international level. For this, we came up with certain results, primarily 3 results where we engage YEs in, sorry for the wrong slide, it should be ECOI. expand their availability, accessibility of capacity building, etc., and create peer-to-peer networks. Towards this, we also planned many activities which are shown in green below. In the first year, we were able to take a few of these activities. Can you go to the next slide? So in the first year, we partnered with SLEVA, which is Sri Lanka Evaluation Association, and Evaluate Sri Lanka for a webinar on data collection, where our co-leaders were the main speakers. We also conducted India Evaluation Case Competition from a period of April to August 2021. During this period, we had registrations of over 90 teams. For these teams, we organized 2 workshops, one on digital data collection and one on basics of M&D. We partnered with 3 organizations, including 2 academic institutions, which are IRMA and Sri Ravi Shankar University. We also organized an orientation session for the teams to make them understand better about what is expected in the case competition, how to approach evaluation plans, preparation, etc. We onboarded 7 jury members from various organizations, and when we had the competition in end of July, in August, we selected the winners, and we also gave them cash prizes to our partner institutions which were sponsoring the prizes. So it was a successful event, and we want to create this into an annual event. The winning team of India Evaluation Case Competition also represented India this year on 4th of November, I guess 6th of November, in the International World Evaluation Case Competition. Last year also, we had mentored the team which participated, represented India in the World Evaluation Case Competition, which came 4th overall. This year also, we have supported the team which has participated. We also partnered with Evaluate Asia, API, and others to organize virtual winter school in March 2021. The next winter school is slated to happen in December 2021. Selection of participants has already completed for it, and we are planning for the event. We also conducted a webinar during Local 21 on role of youth and academia in evaluation. So overall, if you see, Evaluate India has started some of the activities, and the major dimensions which we had decided was capacity development and awareness generation that has been achieved through competitions such as evaluation case competition. And in the coming year, and can you go to the next slide? In the coming year, we plan to continue organizing more webinars and workshops with ECOI and other Evaluate chapters in the region, and also get involved in the P2P Asia activities, conduct IECC 2022, and explore opportunities to have a long-term model where internships and mentorship program can be initiated with some partner agencies to give students a hands-on experience in evaluation. We'll also be supporting ECOI and API in conducting the joint EvalFest and API conference in February 2022. And one idea is to collaborate to prepare online courses which are specifically aimed at YEs. This is one of the major challenges we face in India, that we lack good quality courses which are easily accessible to young students. So we plan to use some online platform to deliver a strong course. And we also want to expand the network across the country, especially in academic institutions. Next slide, please. So the reason that we want to expand is that India being such a huge country and so many people being involved in evaluation, many youth are also involved at different levels. We still have just 170 registered members, and we want to make the community larger and more active, where we share with each other, learn from each other. We are looking for interested YEs to take lead in different activities, handle our social media, create posts for us, conduct trainings, share their experiences, and overall do a much better cross learning from each other. If you are interested, please get in touch with us at evaluateindia@gmail.com. If you are not already a member of Evaluate India, please register to be a member. The link is there, bit.ly join EY India. Thank you.
Thank you, Yatin, for walking us through the vision with which Evaluate India came to be and the activities that we conducted this past year, as well as the next steps. Also, if anybody in the audience wishes to be part of the community of Evaluate India, you may please register to be a member. We will also paste the link in the chat box. And if you know of any other potential young evaluators who would benefit from being part of the community, do please share the same with them. Also, please follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and all other platforms, Twitter, Instagram as well. Moving forward with the event for today. Our first guest speaker is Jaya Darshini Ramaswamy. Jaya is a manager of monitoring and evaluation learning at Jan Sahas. She is working in the civic and social organization on gender-based evaluations, result-based management, impact assessment. She is very passionate about data management and visualization, as well as participatory research, and believes in empowering people by facilitation. We welcome you, Jaya. Thank you for being our guest speaker today. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Surpi, and thank you, all Valued India and Valuation Community of India. I think it's been great being associated with both the organizations and interacting with such modeling, valuation, and learning experts. So I'll quickly talk about how some of the things that I have learned over the journey of 7 years by working in the sector. So I'll quickly share my screen. Surbi, could you please allow me?
Yes.
Okay, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, no, I'm not able to go next slide. Okay. So many professionals have access to a wide range of tools, and often this itself becomes a challenge because not many people would be aware of what tools are available. And indicators are one of the most and more valuable and versatile, but if indicators are not used carefully, then can consume extensive resources and generate data that could be of very little use or no value at all. But often what happens with my experience and working with a lot of organizations is that when team members are not aware of how these indicators are created or what these indicators aim at, it becomes another challenge within the program, within the intervention to map and measure the activities, the outputs and outcomes. So, and because it's a growing sector, a lot of people are still focusing and learning on these fronts. Many newer budding organizations or even an older mentoring organization are still figuring out how these aspects are to be ingrained in the programs. So talking about the key challenges with indicators to ensure their quality and integrity. So a lot of times data is being captured in a way that it's with a pen and paper tool, or is it in a data collection in terms of data technology collection, using the technology for data collection purpose. A lot of times what data is being captured, is it directly linked to what indicator is being calculated or measured, is what is always a question, which I will talk a bit more in my last slide, which is more on challenges and programs, as how we with team of MEL team members have resolved those aspects. Indicators should generate data that are needed and useful. So technically, it should be sound, it should be understandable and practical. It should be able to explain what is the performance of the program, of the intervention. It should be measurable in a, sorry? Is someone saying? Hello?
Please continue.
Okay.
Sure, of course.
So taking an example of education and training, a lot of times outcomes and performance indicators for youth tutoring programs are more supporting in terms of how these interventions are being planned, if in terms of creating learning materials and ensuring that how many number of children are attending these classes, checking enrollment, looking at the learning levels among children, in terms of knowledge, in terms of accessibility. So these aspects often become very important in terms of indicators. Okay, one moment, I think there's something wrong with my internet. Yeah. Another question that often comes to my mind is, why is it necessary to have an indicator? And often, even if there are outputs and outcomes and impact being measured, what is that are you going to measure in order to understand the progress of the program, the challenges that come during the program? How do you know that you're doing good in the program, or there are some learnings critical moments in the program that needs to be catered to or give attendance to. So one example that comes to my mind is perhaps the strongest justifications that provided by Revelion is credible measures of poverty can be a powerful instrument focusing the attention of policymakers on the living conditions of the poor. But put another way, it is easy to ignore the poor if they're statistically invisible. So the measurement of poverty is necessary if it is to appear on the political and economic agenda. So not going into the theory of this, but more on, I'd like to share one of the examples that during one of our programs on land and property rights, it was very important for us to know who are these program participants, who are these beneficiaries, are these male farmers, male marginal farmers, or female marginal farmers. But because the understanding of the program was that we would cater to both the genders, in that way we would not only just capture the data, but for male farmers as well as for female farmers, but have it in a systematic way that we are able to cater to both these interventions. But because this indicator was not defined in the program and said that we would cater to the farmers in general, the intervention then only catered to farmers who were available in the program, or farmers who were where the program team or the field team would visit and understand and provide intervention. Whoever comes to that service provision, only those people were able to receive services on this program. And often because women were not part of this program, or say in some way were failure in attending these services, the number of women marginal farmers were pretty low. Had this been in a case where it was clearly mentioned that, you know, we will cater to so many female female marginal farmers, so many male marginal farmers, in that case, the intervention would have been more clearer towards both the genders and not just to one gender that was just coming to this service provision center. So often a lot of times when we create logic model, theory of change, or rubric framework, or any framework for that matter, a lot of things comes to us in terms of inputs, outputs, and outcomes. And in terms of, as a program manager, as an evaluator, or as an M&E professional, two things always happen. One are process indicators that always one creates for program management, and another is performance indicators to assess the progress and results of the program as an evaluation indicator. As everyone here knows that the indicators are supposed to be smart, but a lot of times, how specific are we able to be? How measurable can it be? Is something that goes on in most of the organization and programs that becomes a debatable topic. So one of the indicators, one of the things that comes to my mind is a lot of times when we create programs and when we do it, within the group of people, which are program managers, researchers, strategists, MEL professionals, a lot of times people would think that there are too many indicators and everything is important. And because all of these would cater to understand the performance of the program, to understand how far is the program being useful to the participants, is it useful for the stakeholders of the program. So this is always one of the concerns and challenges that would narrow down and be prioritized as how these indicators should be. In terms of performance indicators, most commonly used are measures changes towards progress of results, and include outcomes that are considered as evaluation indicators. A lot of times there are organizations or programs that do not have baseline, or directly end up doing an end line to understand the status of the program towards the end of the program intervention. But doing a baseline measure, defining those indicators at that point in time, collecting relevant data, and doing those pre and post assessments and before and after tests in most of the cases is very imperative. Playing with data, again, is a very integral part of monitoring and evaluation and learning. But at the same time, it helps measure the correct data, measure the correct indicator, collect the correct data, and it has to be done periodically. There are organizations who are still using the old school method or still evolving, but as skills, learning capacity of team members in the organization often becomes a very important aspects in the program. So I've been working on one of the themes called violence against women and children, where we try and measure, we measure as how many survivors of sexual violence are able to access justice, are able to go and file an FIR by themselves, or need a support by the organization representatives, by the lawyers, or by the district legislative service authorities. So measuring these indicators help us to understand how many women are still empowered to go and file an first information report in the police station when there is sexual violence. How many of them need support, or they're not confident because they're still afraid of police or accessing these kind of measures that are available for their benefit. So for us as a program, as an M&E professional, it becomes imperative, because that's when we know that we would need lawyers in the program. We would need lawyers who are more sensitive to sexual violence cases. We would need female lawyers who are more sensitive and are coming forward to help with such sexual violence cases. So here indicators and data helps us to understand how our program intervention and strategy has to be developed in these scenarios. So as everybody would know, I'm just reiterating in a very simple way. Clarity, clear purpose is what is important, determining overall scope and framework for assessment, because indicators are nothing more a minute level of what you're going to measure, how you're going to measure, and looking at, and I'll talk about more examples in a bit, looking at each of the programs. If you do not capture indicators, if that understanding is not there, then the program will end up, the activities will go on. You will only focus on, I did this so many activities, I did so many workshops, I did so many stakeholder meetings, but how do we measure the impact in terms of qualitative is also very important. So identifying what needs to be assessed is very important. If we're saying that we're going to do so we often do a mental health training with our barefoot counselors. And the main objective are these, that professional counselors will not be available in rural India. And in those cases, we would need people from the community, from the same lingual, that are able to provide mental health services to the community members who are vulnerable and in poverty or in distress, or if I have to say that. So what happens when professional counselors are not able to participate? So we do barefoot counselors, we train barefoot counselors in mental health, and measuring the knowledge of these barefoot counselors, of what do they understand by counseling, what do they understand by mental health, or is there a superstition beliefs in the community, and are our barefoot counselors able to understand those aspects? So these becomes a very important indicator for us to understand how better or how failure is our training module, or we need to improvise on those aspects. So measuring qualitative nature indicators is very important, and these are some things that I've also been part of. Specific reporting requirements and intended use. A lot of times organizations and programs have different criteria as per what is committed by donor or what is proposed in the proposal. So in those cases, not limiting to what proposal says, but also looking at the larger vision of the program is also very important. And that could be only done by using these basic community level indicators that would help strategize. Again, list and reviewing existing monitoring programs and indicators is very imperative, because if you're able to measure too many things and still feel lost because you've captured so many data. And this is what has happened with us, that we've had so much of data, and then we realized that, okay, this data was not required. Then it should have been happened that we should have discussed it and did a brainstorming on those indicators, because it's not just what donor says it or what the program manager says it. Is it even useful for us? Is it useful for our community members or participants of the program? And then determining the relevant indicators becomes very useful. And then, of course, develop measurable indicators so that the program is able to measure all of those aspects in itself. So overall, as I said, often there are too many indicators, too many people thinking that, we need to capture this as well, we need to capture that as well. But how do you decide and prioritize is very important. And those are the discussions that we've had along with the program team. And M&E is not just the role or responsibility of one person, though definitely there are evaluators that should be detached with the program and understand all these aspects, but it needs to be a collective effort, a culture in the organization, so that everyone translates those learnings in the program and even in the organization. So in one of the organizations that I work with, we created an organizational level indicators because they're doing ample number of things. So how do you measure the impact of the organization? How do you measure the impact of the organization for prevention work, for the work done only on prevention, working on gender-based violence, on creating sensitive, sorry, am I shooting time?
Last
Okay.
2-3 minutes.
I'll continue, yeah. So yeah, coming back to those indicators. So creating those indicators and not just having a discussion within the MEL team, but doing a discussion with the program team, with the leadership team, with the research team, with strategy team has been like an overall help to understand how do we create those indicators at program level, at organizational level. A lot of times, as I mentioned earlier, gender is something that often gets lost in the form of saying that we will capture everything, but it's very important because still women need to come forward for the programs where women are still subordinate to the program. The transgender community needs to be measured, and the intervention done with them needs to be measured so that they are equal at the power of the intervention. And similarly, when working with men on sexual violence is also very important, because it's not just about working with women and girls. Lack of skill sets has been some of the things that I myself have been grappling with my team members, because often a lot of times people consider MIS coordinators as people who are more equipped with data and understand data. But it's not just important to work on data. You need to have those kind of understanding is very important. And that is something that we've been able to create in the organizations that I've worked with. And I think it's still growing. I wouldn't say that we've achieved that goal yet. But the skill set among team members on understanding why indicators are important, why creating an LFA or a TOC is important is very imperative. As I mentioned, no baselines. A lot of programs do not have baseline, and also because then there's a fund crunch. There is the organization don't feel the need until a donor has said it, or do not have the bandwidth to do the work or do that baseline and inline. So a lot of good data, relevant, important interventions are lost because of this. And then after 1 year, you realize you just have an impact report that more speaks about activity and what you've achieved as part of what was committed, but not at a part of what you've learned from the program. Or is it even, has it become a model that could be adapted by other organizations or even other teams for that matter? So these aspects of indicators or TOC, of logic framework and rubric framework becomes very important. I'm still speaking more specific to these things. I think it's very interlinked in a way. Often the challenge is difficulty in measuring qualitative indicators because it's so rich in nature, and yet people would more prefer on numbers that you've achieved. The last point that I'd like to share is data gaps in measuring indicator. So a lot of times that we've observed is the farmer example that I shared. We realize that when you say that these are the schemes or services that you're going to provide to the participants, or are going to facilitate the mental health sessions and counseling for them, what are you going to capture is something that we've always grappled. How much sampling are you supposed to take, or who are supposed to be part of that intervention? How do you define those things and define indicators for the program is always something that is a question or needs to be brainstormed and understood. The next row that I have is more as how did we resolve it, and it was more of a collective measure. I think I could discuss this during the Q&A session as well. I think Surbhi, I hope I have not crossed time.
No, you're absolutely on time.
Yeah, I think that's it from my end. And I think we're going to take the Q&As later, right?
Yes, we will. So I'm just
I'll stop sharing then. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Jaya, for those very interesting insights, and especially your on-field experiences and challenges in terms of M&E indicators and the strategies to maneuver them. As you said, we will be taking questions and answers in the end, and we request all of the audience members and participants to please put their questions in the chat box. Our next speaker for the day is Mr. Ziad Mosa. He's a senior M&E specialist in urban governance and city resilience expert. He has been the president of the International Organization of Cooperation and Evaluation between 2015 and 2017, and the co-chair of Eval Partners between 2016 and 2018. He's currently on the executive board of the International Evaluation Academy. Ziad, we welcome you. Thank you for being here today, and you may begin. The floor is all yours.
Well, thank you. Congratulations to ECOI India for this very special occasion. Yeah, where to start? I'm basically a storyteller, so I'll be telling you some stories. I like the title of the webinar today. So flexible indicators and flexible environments for effective M&E. I think that guy is on the picture is, quite flexible. So let me walk you through a bit of stuff. First, my favorite indicator of all times. So McDonald's claims that he has over 99 billion people served. I mean, yeah, 99 billion meals were sold on different McDonald's outlets at some point in time. And that could very well be an indicator, like we see a lot in our log frames. But does this indicator tells you a bit about the food quality, about equity, about nutritional stuff, about food habits, etc. Well, I have some serious doubts about it. Also, interestingly, we're seeing a lot now. Indicators coming in the spotlight with people fighting about their interpretations, and I'm talking here about COVID. So, for example, this is a graph that shows that unvaccinated people in this new wave hitting the planet are actually being infected and falling ill much more than vaccinated ones, and within vaccinated ones, you have those who have a double dose are significantly lower than those having a single dose. But still, you can see somewhere in the literature a headline like "Pandemic of the Vaccinated." Worldwide data on 188 countries proves the highest COVID-19 cases rates are in the most vaccinated countries. And this is, playing around with the indicators. When a country has reached 70% vaccination coverage, we're comparing 70% against 30%, and obviously the numbers would be mismatched. And then somebody would come and say, play around with the indicators and with some ambiguity. For example, look at this statement. The rate of infection in unvaccinated people is 5 times the rate of infection in vaccinated people. Etc. This really calls for a more cautious approach on how we're formulating the indicators, how we are interpreting the indicators, and how we're communicating about the indicators. And this depends really on the context, as there is no one-size-fits-all approach to indicators. Let me try to explain through this. Sometimes indicators are supposed to measure an intervention that has a very high degree of certainty and a very high degree of agreement. Let's say polio vaccination. In polio vaccination, and that was before the defiance that against vaccination that COVID is generating now. We knew that if you manage to reach an entire rural area or an entire number of villages, if you had enough vaccines, if you had training staff, if you had proper means to handle the vaccines, proper means to vaccinate, then simply put, you could claim success and that you've got 100% vaccination, number of vaccines, number of people vaccinated, number of children under 5, number of villages covered. I mean, it flows quite simply. However, in the development world, most of the cases that we face are not simple. There could be some where, let's say, the technical solution is in our hands, but the social complication around it makes it quite difficult and really an art, as Rashmi was saying in the beginning, and what type of indicators to set. For example, abortion or COVID. Let's take abortion. Abortion, in case of an unwanted pregnancy, there are a wide array of technological / medical solutions, depending on which stage the pregnancy is being diagnosed. And for each of these, there is a kind of solution. But I mean, is it straightforward? What about social consideration? What about religious considerations? What about moral considerations, etc., etc., etc. So, and that sense, and now COVID is kind of putting abortion in the shade. There are vaccines. A huge amount of money was invested in their development, and still we see a number of complicated issues that does not make COVID vaccination as simple as polio vaccination, and hence the difference of indicators around it. Sometimes there are other types of interventions where, it's common sense to address them, but there are a lot of technical complications that surround them. For example, combating desertification. There are policy considerations, there are technical considerations, there are political interferences, there are social stuff. And in that sense, if planting a green wall to prevent the desert in one country succeeded, there is absolutely no guarantee that the same will succeed in another country. And hence, an indicator such as the number of trees planted, or let's say the number of community groups that are mobilized in the planting, or the number of trees that survive after 1 year of planting, etc., would be difficult to measure, and definitely not comparable in one context to another. Let alone the outlier, where there's no certainty and there's no agreement, and this is where we fall into chaos. Anything related to war, Afghanistan last month, the Ukrainian border this month, etc. And then most of interventions aiming at policy change, at improving conditions, at the SDGs, all of these fall in a zone of complexity. And again, here, there's a wide array of approaches, and the oversimplification of indicators can be sometimes even harmful. Let me give an example. What you see on this picture, I think, is intuitive. These are the thermometers, different types of thermometers. And thermometers are supposed to measure temperature, right? But anybody is aware about an awareness-o-meter that measures improved awareness, or an ownership-o-meter, where you can measure the degree of ownership. To the best of my knowledge, nobody has invented them, and I think everybody who claims to be an evaluator, just like the doctors have some tools in their handbag, we evaluators would buy these and measure awareness with an awareness-o-meter and ownership with an ownership-o-meter, if ever these tools come to existence. And I mean, these are snapshots of indicators that you commonly encounter: greater awareness, empowered women, increased collaboration, governmental commitment, gender sensitivity, etc., etc., etc. But I mean, and here let me disclose something. I am trained as an outcome mapping practitioner, and most of my evaluative approach is derived from outcome mapping. And this is one of the key principles in outcome mapping, advocating to replace what is referred to as indicators by progress markers. However, I will not be doing outcome mapping preaching today. Nevertheless, the logic along which I've prepared this presentation is inspired by outcome mapping. Simply put, if you look at this picture, smiling faces, taking a group photo, that probably happens at the end of a training, let's say on women empowerment in southern countries. And the classical tools would be like, I mean, an intuitive one, the number of people who are there, but as an evaluator, you have absolutely no merit in counting the number of people, because the auditors and the accounting department, who's going to be paying for their meals and for their hotel stay and for their travel costs, if these are involved, is doing a much better job than you, right? You could then argue that, okay, we're going to do pre-post tests and then see how much knowledge and practices the participants have acquired, and yeah, let's say that we want 75% improvement between the pre-test and the post-test and 90% of the participants. But all these beautiful indicators do not give a credible pathway to moving from taking a photo at a conference and to taking action at a particular event. And if there's one, like I'll be giving 2 or 3 takeaways today. One of the key takeaways is always think how you can move from picture perfect, from counting static stuff, into using the evaluative approach, whether monitoring or evaluation, to move from process into the outcome. And here also 2 thoughts. This is also a classical picture and outcome mapping training. So rather than being utterly focused on inputs and outputs and how inputs are converted to outputs, etc., the monitoring and evaluation processes should be focusing on put. In other terms, rarely somebody embraces an evaluation career or even a development career just because it's a job. There are much more interesting 9-to-5 jobs that are less stressful. Sometimes there's a vocation to contribute to human betterment, to transformational processes, to a better world, in a sense. But getting to a better world is not by quantifying inputs and outputs and musing on how outputs were converted into shorter-term outcomes, etc. It's how about the people we are supposed, the life of the people we are supposed to serve is being changed. So that is also another key takeaway I wanted to give you. And also, here let's put in the spotlight what is becoming a classical schism between we have an indicator to measure, and let me tell you a story, between quantitative and qualitative. And one does not rule the other. And I can tell you after 25 years in the business that both complement each other, in the sense that the stories around what is happening, and when we're talking about complexity, there are increasingly methods, among other, for example, this is taken from the front cover of Most Significant Change, which is a qualitative technique. There's outcome harvesting, there's outcome mapping, and others who are focused on in a very rigorous way, would give you data based on stories. And here the story or the transformational processes that can be derived from these stories become your indicators. And hence, we shouldn't be really narrowly focused on quantification, and acknowledge that stories also do bear an important dimension. Yeah, also some slightly touching on the hierarchy within outcome indicators. So, for example, let's say an outcome indicator such as preventing global warming by reducing carbon emissions. You could have one level down, which is reducing carbon emissions by promoting sustainable transport, and that would entail a number of complementary actions to reach the outcome on top, which is reducing carbon emissions. But still, if you take sustainable transport per se, then you could go on saying promoting sustainable transport by increasing the share of electric cars, etc., etc., etc. And then within electric cars, you could formulate something like increase the share of electric cars by increasing the availability of charging outlets. And as you go down, you would go into pricing, you would go into equity on who accesses a car or not, you'll go on subsidy, whether you want to subsidize cars running on fuel or diesel into electric cars, etc., etc. So within that hierarchy, it is also quite important to situate at which level we are and which level we are addressing. And speaking about levels, normally any project or program, whether big or small, whether focused on gender or sustainable farming or policy change, would normally have three interconnected spheres. One, the first sphere would be the sphere of control, where, I mean, the inputs, the activities, and the outputs. And in the sphere of control, you are supposed to give the very best of what you can, because you control it. You control which strategy you're going to follow to I don't know, increase the number of electric cars all the way into fighting global warming. You decide on which activities, you decide on which consultants, you decide on which projects or programs. So everything within your sphere of control, the indicators linked to that sphere of control are easier to measure, and there is a direct attribution to the project or the program. However, a project or a program which is in the sphere of control ultimately wants to reach a wider context, whether it's a region, whether it's a country, whether it's a specific group, whether it's a specific issue. And in that sense, in order to move from activities and outputs all the way into what's referred to as longer term outcomes or impact or what have you, you need somehow to get into outcomes. And the easiest and the most logical, at least in my personal biased opinion, definition of outcomes is observable changes in behavior, because these observable changes in behavior would ultimately lead to changes in lives. So, and unfortunately, in most of the, let's say, classical M&E setups that we encounter, we often jump from, you know, increasing the number of outlets to charge electric cars into the impact, which is lowering carbon emissions. But along the way, you have A, to convince people to use electric cars, B, make electric cars more affordable, C, ensure that there are policy incentives to move from a diesel or fuel car into an electric car, etc., etc. And these all of these moves have people around them. It's people who drive the cars. It's people who buy the cars. It's people who use the cars to commute to work, etc., etc., etc. So if I mean, you cannot jump to reducing carbon emissions unless you are sure somehow that the behavior of the polluters, if we put it in that sense, has shifted or changed. And this is where the importance of outcomes. So in terms of who does what, so basically you have the project or the program who ultimately wants to reach a certain number of beneficiaries. To reach this number of beneficiaries, you would be working with a number of stakeholders, but within these stakeholders, there are some of these stakeholders with whom you're spending, let's say, 80% of your time and 70 to 80% of your budget to influence their change. And hence, rather than going fishing of what goes on out in the wild, in the sphere of interest, you have to tailor your indicators in a way that captures, in a real hands-on way, the changes in behavior that are occurring. And as such, number of people, number of women who are trained on how to face domestic violence or gender-based violence becomes less relevant than the number of women who actually go to a police station to file a complaint against a violent husband. And even in the narrative and even in the way you present your project, or if you come to me as an evaluator to evaluate your project, if you're going to keep telling me that you know, you've done 100 awareness sessions and 50 villages attended by 200,000 women, and you want me to believe that these women are now aware, I would believe you much less than if you tell me that as a result of our interventions, the number of complaints that were filed has shifted from, let's say, 10 per month to 100 per month. Similar to that would be, let's say, the women filing complaints, or go seeking care. So if a woman was seriously beaten, we all know that she would tend to say that, sorry, I fell on the stairs, or I don't know what, but like having the courage to go and seek treatment in a primary healthcare center or a hospital, and with or without, you know, disclosing the reason of what has happened to her, is again a much more powerful indicator than when you tell me number of women, etc. So keep the focus on boundary partners and learn about outcome mapping when you can. It's amazing in that sense. Let me close by my favorite anecdote, which is avoiding, which was taking place between that baby camel and his mother. So he's asking her, I have something really bothering. And she says, what's bothering you, son? And I said, well, Mom, why do camels have humps? And the mother would say, well, you know, darling, we're desert animals. We need the humps to store water. We can survive in the desert 14 days without water, etc. And then the son would say that, Mommy, why our legs are long and our feet round? And the mother would say, you know, son, it's, you know, to walk in the desert better than anyone else. This is why we are called the ship of the desert. And then he said, I have one more question. Why our eyelashes are long? Sometimes it bothers my sight. And the mother would say, you know, honey, it's because in the desert, the sun is very strong, and you know, the eyelashes protect our eyes from the sun, but also the wind. And then the young camel would recap. So the humps are to store water when we are in the desert. The legs are for walking through the deserts, and the eyelashes are to protect our eyes from sand in the desert. What the hell are we doing in the zoo? And yeah, I love this quick metaphor just to tell you, as young and emerging professionals, that you might be working on poverty reduction schemes and you're going to write beautiful reports on how you fought poverty, but you are in the zoo where poverty is prevailing and sometimes is increasing. You will be called to work on programs to promote democracy and to promote human rights and what have you. And all the indicators in the zoo around you would tell you that democracy is dwindling down and that human rights are not respected. You will be called to work on programs on corruption, etc., etc., etc. So, especially as young and emerging evaluators, keep in mind that you need to speak truth to power and don't get carried away within the micro interventions in which you are working, because the zoo out there is quite diverse. Let me close by one anecdote from one of my friends and mentors, Terry Smutillo. He was mentioning, I looked it up this morning. I couldn't find on the internet the literature around it, but the story goes as follows. But I could find pictures of young boys suing football. So the professional footballs that are used in professional games, you need young boys, often in Southeast Asia. This photo is from Bangladesh, and I took off the logos because we're not in the process of naming and shaming. But yeah, you need boys because they have power and they have minute hands, so they can sue the football in a much better way. And in that area, an organization had noticed a lot of school dropout of the boys' age between 12 and 14 years, because they were taken out of school to work in these workshops for something like $1 a day. And the intervention was that the NGO would provide, instead of $1, let's say $0.75 for the parents, and meals and support at school, so that the income that these boys would bring to their poor family would be compensated somehow. And after 1 year, when revisiting, the indicator was like 80%, reducing by 80% the school dropout of the boys aged between 12 and 14 in 1 year. It was a blasting success. I mean, the indicator came above 95%. And yeah, that was brilliant. But at the same time, the workers noticed that school dropout has increased among the boys aged between 10 and 12. So while everything was fine and in the green on the indicators about the boys between 12 and 14, parents said, okay, we're going to keep the older one at school and get the $0.75, but we're going to send his younger brother now to work at the workshops. So sometimes an indicator, even if it's shiny and bright, could hide a bigger and harsher and sadder reality underneath. And luckily, Martin Luther King had a dream. If he had an indicator, Obama wouldn't have been president of the US 40 years later, after Martin Luther had its dream. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. I'll just quickly begin sharing my screen. So In continuation with your awesomeness meter and ownership meter and the dangers that lie in the indicators, we have a question for you, Ziad. The question is that you've made a great point about having indicators that are too vague. Example, active participation, greater awareness, etc. And how can we avoid these kinds of indicators, and other examples of better ones that you can please share with the audience? It's a question from the audience.
Great, thank you, audience. To avoid these indicators, as I told you, greater awareness, wow. But what would greater awareness mean? Better empowerment, wow. But in practice, what does it mean? Make an effort to formulate your indicators in a way that tells a story of change, that translates very clearly what better awareness could do at the end of the line. Exactly like the example I gave on women that are victims of domestic violence. Aware, everybody is aware. You can put the spot. It gets on my nerves when I see billboards and TV screens and what have you saying, be aware. I mean, be aware, okay. But do you have the courage to go and file a complaint? This is what you should measure, not be aware. Do you have the courage to go and seek treatment? This is what you should measure and hold yourself accountable for, rather than say, be aware. And the rest goes on, whether we're talking about climate change, sustainable agriculture, deforestation, human rights, everything. It can be poetry or could be concrete actions. The strength of the evaluation profession, what would make you and me and everybody else in this room not only indispensable, but an active agent of change, is to advocate against empty talks, is to measure what matters and hold those who are getting money, and handsome money, because I was a bit, I mean, in our industry, salary scales are pretty handsome compared to others, and we don't have the constraints of the private sector of reaching targets and what have you. So let's use the vocation and the funds available to achieve real change. And we, the evaluation people, can make that change happen.
Thank you. Very, very well put. And another question, you talked about input, output, put, which was so interesting. So in line with that, we have a question that we've understood that focusing on measuring outcomes is key. But does that mean that there's no value in tracking outputs or process level indicators at all, as a way to be able to track how your intervention is related to those outcomes? And then another one very closely linked asks that flexible indicators emerge from one's understanding of the development ecosystem. What is important compared to what is pivotal are vital questions that one must tackle. And as Ziad sir said, one size cannot fit all. So the development of credible indicators is highly contextualized at all stages. So both the speakers, the questioner asks, the participant asked that both of the speakers hinted at, but did not voice the use of proxy indicators as backup indicators. So would you like to speak a little bit about that?
Oh, proxy indicators. I mean, before embracing an evaluation career, my hero, and let's see, no, it's in the other room. I have my picture with Robert Chambers. And the work of Robert Chambers has been foundational for participatory development. And Robert Chambers was one of the early ones who flagged this issue of proxy indicators. I didn't speak about it because, you know, we have 20 minutes and a lot to cover. But one of the great examples of Chambers was like if an agricultural development program in a rural area in Asia or Africa was successful, then you could have 3 of these indicators. Either the farmer would get a second wife because now he can afford it, or he would buy a motorcycle because now he can afford it, or, I mean, this is the best case scenario, you'd have less debt at the shop in the village for the households, or even better, buy a small refrigerator. So yes, indeed. And now with, I mean, this could be maybe another talk in the cycle of conference is the big data and metadata. So now a satellite image before and after, or in 5 years, if it shows that more electricity have reached a certain area as a result of income generating projects or what have you, then that means that people are now able to afford electricity, etc., etc., etc. So indeed, it's not like you always have to measure straightforward. And even in the domestic violence example I talked about, so better awareness. You could go and do a survey. If you did 200 sessions and 50 villages for 1,000 women, you can either go and run a survey with these 1,000 women, or simply you could go to the 5 primary healthcare centers in the area and check if the number of cases reported on domestic violence have increased or decreased. To be continued.
Yes, absolutely agreed. A question for Jaya. Jaya, can you share some experiences where you find that some indicators were not as good to capture the information that was needed and that you had to revise indicators? And I'll just club 2 questions together. Second part of the same question you could just answer is if you ever faced an issue to develop indicators too early and before you got to know how change happens, and you locked in to the behaviors that were probably less relevant. Over to you.
Right. Okay, wait a second. Yeah, right. So responding to your first question, I think, I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Yes. So it's just the question says that requesting you to share your experiences where you found some indicators are not so good, not as good to capture the information that you needed. And you probably had to go to field and figure out that this indicator needs revision and then how you went about it.
Right. So what happened is a lot of times the indicator, when the program team doesn't create it, or there are near submissions for the program proposals, and that is why only the fundraising team or some external partner or person who is more skilled in writing proposals, when those persons create those kind of indicators, that is where the mismatch happens, that they don't have a full understanding of the program and they're creating a proposal. They've created those indicators with what comes to their mind or how they envisage the program. And when you have this program team who's the implementer of the program, who knows what are the nitty-gritties in the program, and then realizes that there's a big gap between these indicators that were created and now what has happened, what is in the program. So just one example that I should share is one of the indicator that was created was number of duty bearers working in target communities that can describe key changes they have made in their work practices that demonstrate improved commitment towards tackling forced labor. Now, this indicator is such complex in itself, and there are too many things to be measured. And when it's directly given to the program person that, okay, now this is how you have to implement the program, and these are the indicators that you need to measure, this person gets confused, this person feels lost, that I have so much things committed into this one indicator. How am I going to measure it? How am I going to map those data sets? So again, because this was given in the proposal, cannot be changed because it's already done. The donor is not helping to make it flexible. We had to go by what it was, but then we had to break it down internally as who these duty bearers are. Are these only police officials? Are these stakeholders? What is the impact after they've been part of the program? So as Zayed sir said, not just about what you've done so much, how it has translated into output and outcome is something that you need to measure. So then at that point in time, you need to also measure improvement in being a duty bearer and addressing the issues of worker protection or of forced labor. But at the same time, are these Are these duty bearers taking lead in resolving child labor cases? Are they taking lead in resolving bonded labor cases? Is something that we had to, break down further. So that was one response that I had. Could you repeat the second question, please?
Yes, so the second question is very much in line with the first, that is it ever an issue that you developed an indicator too early, so to say, and before you knew how change happens, and so you got locked into behaviors that were less relevant? I think you answered it when you said that yes, you did get locked in because you'd already committed something and you couldn't go back. You had to further divide those.
Yes, yes. And I just want to add to that, what has happened is, unfortunately, I've been part of the programs where the program is ongoing, and there were nothing to be measured. There was nothing in place. And after being onboarded, after bringing that understanding among the team members, it is then after that you realize that 1 year program implementation is almost done, and then you need to have those learnings so that you can at least do that assessment, that what have I learned from this program? And because there was nothing earlier, no indicator, no statement of purpose, nothing, but mostly, these are the things that we're going to achieve in the program. So knowing that, I think that itself becomes a learning that, okay, we need to know what are we going to capture. We need to know what change are we going to create by this program, or how does this model going to help the intervention or the beneficiary, the program participant. So I would say, even if it's not there, it was still a learning, because then you know that these are the things that you need to do so that you're able to measure all these things. And that kind of helps. But it's also frustrating, trust me, that you realize that such a good program, such a good intervention, and yet not measured properly, not captured properly, no data being captured properly. So those kind of frustration often leads to things that, okay, we need to do this, but then there are no learnings already. So I think just to that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you to both our speakers. I think I have left today's session much the wiser. I've learned so much, and it's been a lot of fun today. For the closing remarks today, may I please call upon Dr. Rajiv Nandi, who is the Associate Director at ISST, the founder and core group member of the Evaluation Community of India, and member, Board of Directors, Community of Evaluation South Asia. He serves on the Council of the International Evaluation Academy. Rajiv sir, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Surabhi. Thank you so much for inviting me to deliver this closing remarks for today's session. Yeah, so on flexible indicators, flexible environment for effective M&E. Let me express my deep appreciation for both the speakers first, Joya and Ziad, for making very interesting presentations. Okay, and for personally, for me, it's a lot of food for thought actually, and also like to thank the participants for their great discussion and good questions actually in the chat box. Excellent. So I think that today's webinar, our idea was to initiate a discussion on indicators, question the entire designing of indicators, the kind of indicators we use for monitoring and evaluation. So so and how to create, and what are the real questions behind creating these flexible indicators. Now, always this advantage of flexible indicators, because it is very relevant to the context. And I think both the presenters brought that issue very strongly. Like, when it is just not designing an indicator, but also like, it's for better learning and better understanding also about the program. Okay. And the real questions that you are asking, that what the change actually you want to see there. Okay. And both like Jaya's and Ziad's presentations very was very highly balanced. So like Jaya very rightly highlighted the importance of data, like designing of indicators, and then how it's connected with the change that we want to see, and then like what you can measure and what actually it's not possible to measure, and those questions. And also very prominently she highlighted the issues of those people, those stakeholders who are at the margins of the programs. And then to capture their voice, their understanding, their feeling, and how you actually make innovative indicators to capture that change and their voice and their perspective actually about the program. Now she also highlighted the challenges and how to resolve. I like that table she showed there. And I think when he talked about the shared responsibility, absolutely, I think this is a shared responsibility, this monitoring evaluation, it's not one person's job. So absolutely fantastic. And Ziad, as usual, always he takes you to a different domain and motivate you, stimulate you to think from a different angle altogether. So absolutely, this no one size fits all is actually the started asking us what actually you want to see and what are the change actually you want to see, and are indicators the last thing to measure those change, to understand those changes. I think it was definitely it's very useful for young professionals, even for the mature professionals like us. So I think that today's webinar somehow tried to communicate that this discussion is not just to say that the flexibility is good, the alternative is always good, but to highlight the fact that this uniformity, this rigidity is not perfect always, not effective in most situations sometimes. So this these standard uniform rigid indicators often undermine the change that we like to see there. So this basic questions actually definitely will be with us. And I think after listening to these presentations, I'll always think about these presentations in future whenever I'll get an opportunity to design some indicators or evaluate or some program or design any evaluation for any program. So I think I think it was very a good learning experience for me, and definitely I think that for most of our participants. So let me stop here and hand it over to Surabhi. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv, sir. I request all of the participants to stay on for just one more minute. After the vote of thanks is delivered, we will take a selfie, our own version of our webinar selfie, because we're not meeting in person. So please stay on for 2 more minutes. For the vote of thanks for today's webinar and today's event, I call upon Biswajit Pradhan, who is my co-leader in EY Youth India. He's an independent management consulting associate with institutions, MSMEs, and startup projects. He's experienced with programs of UNIDO, UNDP, FAO, DFID, the World Bank, CIDA, and government and private institutions across the country. Biswajit, over to you.
Thank you, Surabhi. Can we have the next slide? Thank you, everyone. I think it was a perfect blend of having the young and emerging evaluators and the experienced evaluation enthusiasts in one platform today. So I would like to thank on behalf of ECOI and EY Youth India to all the eminent guests who spoke about the context today. So Dr. Ziad and Ms. Jaya, so thank you very much for pulling out your valuable time for sharing your knowledge in this platform. And I must thank Dr. Rashmi and Dr. Rajiv for expressing their views on setting the context and also summarizing the entire subject that was discussed today. And my dear colleague Yatin and Surabhi for taking us through the entire journey and a wonderful moderation from her. So above all, I think all the audience here, we are privileged to have people from very eminent fields in terms of experience and values that they bring into the learning of such platforms. And also would like to thank all the organizers who were part of us for their passion and dedication to put across all these webinar for us today. And coming forward, we'll be having more such sessions, which will be very interesting and intriguing to from engaging learning platform like this. And with all, I would like to end the my talk, and thank you very much for all of us for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Biswajit. So I request everybody to switch on their videos so that we can take our webinar selfie. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and
There are two screens that I have to take photo of, so give me a couple of minutes. Smile, please.
I think we should change the back order because now the co-hosts are taking the center stage, or at least this is how it's looking from my side. Yeah, even better. Okay. All right.
Okay, one photo is done.